All right. Okay. So my to-do list today is to write a little utility to help me with my daily work. So I'm going to write this application here. I check first when I get up if the world is destroyed. And if it isn't, I read my mail, and then I guess I go around in a loop, but I haven't bothered with the loop. And if you've seen my presentations last couple of years, you will know that it's easy to check now whether the world is destroyed, because there's a website that will tell you that. So if you have HttpCommand, you can go out and find out whether the world is in fact still there. And if it is, then you can read your mail. And I'm not using SMTP package for this. I've decided instead I want to go out in .NET and use something called MailKit, which is a package in .NET. So here's our entire application. And there are a couple of things here that we didn't write, right? This is where the packages make your life easier. So HttpCommand get, so that I can ask the question about the world. And something called MailKit, which gives me a POP3 client, which allows me to then read my mail. Yeah. This one is a Tatin package written in APL by Brian. And the other one, I have no idea. It's a C# package, widely used, I think. And as you can see from the code there, it's pretty easy to read your mail if you have that. So, run it. All right. So I've already started the demo. And I'm going to trace this code so you can see what's happening. Right, so if world destroyed, HttpCommand get the data. It's some XML data. We can hover over that and see what it is. It's a little bit disappointing that this data isn't up to date. They haven't bothered to, they updated it 5 hours later, but then they didn't bother again. But I guess it's still the best information available to us, so we'll go with that, and you just check then whether it says nope in the right place. And okay, so the world is not destroyed. We'll read our mail. We'll set up the user, the server. We'll get the password from the environment, right, folks? You don't have the password in your source code. You don't put it in a link file that you update to GitHub. You put it in an environment variable or something safe. I have to be very careful now not to hover over that variable. But I will reveal to you that the password length is 12, and very carefully move my mouse back. And then I'm going to get hold of, this is what is called an enum, an enumeration. There are lots of options for how you set your secure sockets up. I need one called start TLS. I think Jason told me that, or I found it on the internet, I don't remember. I create a POP3 client, I connect to Dyalog's server, I authenticate user and password, I have one messages, and message from, to, etc., subject, good luck, hope your presentation goes well. I've commented out the line that would have deleted the message, because otherwise I'd have to send another message for when I do this again. And I disconnect. Yeah, that was easy. So what happened? Well, here's our evolution. We had the workspace, and I've done presentations now from Mark said it was barely working, link 1. It's now working, I think, quite well. How many people are actively using link now? Quite a few, good. And it's generally working. It's not barely working anymore, right? And that allows us to use Git or Bitbucket or whatever, as Mark explained. So, why would you need anything else? And in fact, well, there's several reasons. The most important one is that it helps you manage these dependencies. So if you want to use a Tatin package or a NuGet package, Cider, the project management system, allows you to it creates an environment where it's easy for you to declare that you have dependencies. And then you could have it, it's nice to have an environment that will do all these standard things like run a build function and decide where to load the code, whether it should be loaded with an alias so that it doesn't have a name conflict with some other stuff that you're using, and so on and so forth. And the functionality of Cider can really be entirely described by this this is a Cider configuration file, where we can see that it points to some folders where the dependencies get loaded. There's an init, like a quadlx. There's a make. There's a project space to load it into. There's a declaration of how to run tests. There's link options if you want to use non-default link settings. You can declare system variables in the configuration file, and there's a user-defined section as well. And once you've got your project up and running, you'll have a folder that looks like this. APL source contains your code, and then the packages of various types and the configuration file. And that's really, it's quite simple. But this talk is mostly about packages. So what is a package? Here's a picture of one. So a project is your source code and some dependencies and the various bits of configuration that we looked up, something that Cider could use. There are also other package managers, like, project managers like Acre and Dado, which all have, roughly this kind of functionality. And a package is then typically something that has been built from a project in a specific format, like the Tatin format, and you upload it to the Tatin server, and you can then go to the website and find it, or you can use API functions to find out what packages are there. So Tatin is a package manager for Dyalog APL. As you can see, the logo is intended to show that it's a nice way to package apples, a Tatin tart, thanks to Adam. And you can list them from APL. There's a Tatin user command to list all the packages, and it's still practical to write. There's only 48 packages, so you can write little defuns like that to find out that Kai wrote 42 of them, and Davin Church 4 of them, and then Dyalog 2 of them. Here are the 2 Dyalog ones. And if in a year's time this number is still 2, I may decide to take early retirement. So my career is in your hands, guys. You decide. And then we have NuGet, or NuGet, I'm not sure. There seems to be a food or drink theme with all of these package managers, like Homebrew on the Apple, and Chocolatey was the predecessor to NuGet in the .NET environment. And while I was working on these slides, the number went from 361,000 to 374,000 packages. I don't know whether that's a good thing. The Tatin, if you go to tatin.dev, you can get a list of packages, and it's still no more than you could, a couple of page downs and you can see them all, but there is a filter function. So if you wanted to see the zip file ones, I'm not sure why we already need 3 zip file packages, but this is what makes it so wonderful to have a package management system, is that there's so much choice. So even when you only have 48, there's already choice. If you want to run processes under program control, like Stig was doing earlier, there are already 2 APL team packages. And I think maybe my career will be saved by somebody making a Dyalog APL process package as well, to wrap the functionality we have for that. But even now, so then there'll be 3. There'll be an APL team APL process and a Dyalog APL process. And you choose. There's our homepage. And you can drill down on a package eventually, and you can see who made it, what's the license, who maintains it, is it available for Linux, Mac, Windows, etc. Or you can search for that in the web page. And you can see what dependencies it has, if that's important to you. Yep, we looked at this thing. I don't know why I have 2 slides. Oh, yes, I wanted to show the tags. So they are tags. But again, we immediately run into this, is it curated question? Is there a gatekeeper for this? Because you can see even now we already have both. Is this working? No. We have date and dates. And we have utilities, which is great. Maybe we should have one called packages. There should be a tag called package to help people find things. Anyway, so in my application, if I want to use this HTTP command, all I have to do once I've opened the package, and I'll do this live in a minute just to prove that it's not just a PowerPoint thing. You say cider.add dependencies and the name of the package. And if what you type there uniquely identifies a package, you'll get, in this case, the latest one. You could have provided a version number if you wanted a specific one. And immediately then that will materialize a namespace. So D08 was the name of my project that I opened. That's already scrolled off the top. But we immediately have HttpCommand now as a reference in our namespace, so we can call it as I did in the function you saw earlier. NuGet or NuGet is the .NET. So this is the .NET manager used basically by all C# programmers these days, I think. And Microsoft and people who use .NET are moving stuff into here sort of as the standard way of distributing things. You need .NET 6 or later if you want to experiment with this today. I'm not going to go through this slide again, which I had in the keynote, but so we're on the forward-moving part of the .NET version history, so 5, 6, and later. And it also has a web page where you can go and search. I thought for fun, I'd go and search for fun, and you can see there's a lot of fun available in NuGet. I think the way you usually use a NuGet package is somebody tells you about it, and then you go and download it. I don't know, has anybody here searched successfully for a package on this, using this interface? It seems like a bit of an uphill struggle. So adding a NuGet package, for example, there's a very simple package called clock. And all you have to do, it's the same as with Tatin, cider.add NuGet dependencies and the name of the package. And again, if you don't specify a version number, you get the latest one. And in exactly the same way as with the Tatin package, you now get a namespace in your project space with that name. And you can then, with the .NET thing, you can continue dotting into that and call the UTC now method and get an instance of a class back where you can see the hour and minute. And in fact, the way this is implemented, this is all C# code that's been compiled to DLLs. All that Cider is doing here is creating an empty namespace with a quad using in it that points to the DLL. And in Dyalog APL, the .NET bridge, that's all that's required to make those things essentially part of your namespace or workspace. Okay, so let's go and do that. So I'm going to change that to a 2. Clear the workspace. Do not disturb is on. Right, so I'm going to open a project now which has no dependencies, the D08. The one I used before, if you were looking carefully, was called D08 complete. I'm now opening D08, which has no dependencies. So we'll open the folder. This is what it looks like now. You see it has no dependencies. And I will add HttpCommand. Yes, I want to reload them. And we can see now that we have a Tatin dependencies folder, and in there is the code for HttpCommand that has been downloaded from the Tatin server and placed in there. And in the workspace, oops, did I? Okay, let's add just to show that there's also an API function. You don't have to use the user commands. You can call quadac.cider add NuGet dependencies, and in that case you have to, if you're not using the user command will figure out that you already have a Cider project open, and it's going to add them to that. If you use the API, I think you need to specify it, right? It won't figure it out itself. And if we go back up here, we'll see that we now have a NuGet packages folder, where what's actually happened here is that we make use of some infrastructure that .NET provides, where we create a make-believe C# application, and we declare the dependencies, and then we ask NuGet to go, or .NET and NuGet to go and get everything and put it into a folder called published. And that materializes all the DLLs that we needed. So we have MailKit and MIMEKit. And you can see we have a whole bunch of dependencies that they had. They need some bouncy castle cryptography, for example, to do the hashing of passwords and so on. So if we now open our project again, change into the space, we can see that we have HttpCommand. And the way the Tatin dependencies are actually loaded into your workspaces, they all go into something called hash._Tatin dialog, where you get all of the exact version number. But in your space, you just have this thing called HttpCommand, which is a reference to there. So if you had multiple, if you loaded multiple things that for some reason needed different versions of HttpCommand, you could have them all up there in that space. So we can see what the methods are here. We can get hold of the content of dialog.com. We can create an HTML renderer and put the data we got in there. That's fairly pointless, but it's a nice demo. And I've already shown you that. What's in that folder? MailKit is just a reference, and if we look inside MailKit, in the quad using, we can see that it set up the using for that. And that's really all there is to it. Let me just see, I have a few more slides, but I think I've shown you most of it. Yeah, so there's this business of dependencies. And this wonderful poem by the inventor of De Morgan's laws and in mathematical induction. But you don't really need to worry about them, because if you install a package, a Tatin or a NuGet package that has dependencies, they automatically get loaded. So here's a bit of a constructed example where I created a project which had compare files and zip archive as dependencies. And they depended on these things. I think both of them depend on files and dirs. But Tatin loads all of the dependencies into one place. And then there's a file called build list, which identifies which are the ones that are the principal dependencies, the ones that need to be materialized as namespaces in your project, and the other ones which just get loaded into somewhere where the packages that need them can find them, essentially. And in the case of NuGet, it's exactly the same, except we're talking about DLLs. Those are the principal DLLs, MailKit and MIMEKit, and the others are all dependencies. And you can see there's also there's a NuGet packages deps JSON. So these things essentially work exactly the same way. So if I loaded that package, which is called flea test, we can see that we have our principal dependencies. We can see that that's actually a reference to compare files 401 API. If we go and have a look up in the Tatin namespace, we can see that it's loaded all of the sub-dependencies into there as well. And if we go into compare files and ask what references it can see, then we can see that APL tree utils and files and dirs and so on, things that it needs, have been made references inside its namespace. But we don't have our project space cluttered with that. That's all hidden. Yep, I already said that. And again, we have slightly different file formats for Tatin, the Tatin build list and the NuGet packages C# project description. But essentially the information is just in there. And then you have two package managers that know how to bring them in. Yep, so what we're using under the covers, of course, is link. So when your APL source is linked in, that's all being handled by link. If you edit one of your functions, the source is updated immediately, and you can use Git or Bitbucket or SVN to manage it. Cider is the project manager. Tatin and NuGet are the two package managers that Cider now knows about. And this has all been done in the in the last 3 years or so, I think. So Tatin, well, we started talking about it before that, but Tatin in 2020, Cider 2021. Tatin, we think, is sort of close to complete. It just needs packages to be filled with packages. Cider, I think, is still a bit of a prototype, and you should expect it to change a bit over the next year or two. And Link is now at version 4, and I think fairly stable. And we have a to-do list, but I think everybody's eyes are glazing over, so I won't go into the detail of that. Actually, maybe one thing, which is shell callable API. So that's something that, you bring new people into the organization like Stefan, and he says, but a package manager has to have a shell callable API so that IT managers can say, well, I want to install Dyalog APL and these Tatin packages and these NuGet packages, and then build a Docker container and upload it. And he doesn't want to start APL and start typing user commands. He wants to be able to script that from the outside. So Tatin you need to be able to say Tatin install packages from outside APL without starting APL. Snippets, I guess you would call these things, Kai. I think we need a mechanism for loading part of a package. So you could allow defense to be a package, and you can say, but actually, I only want queens from defense in my application. I think that's an important piece of functionality for this. But we're just getting started with this. Even those of us. Let's see who else. I mean, Brian to some extent, but Stefan, Gil, Kai, Rich, Park, and myself, I think, are sort of the people who are really trying to work concentrated on this. We're still learning about it, so expect some changes. But please do try and use it. And those of you who have experience with NPM and other package managers, please get back to us if you feel there's something that's missing, because I really believe that this is critical for the next generation of APL users, if not for the existing ones. I think the existing ones also need to be able to load MailKit, for example, and do that kind of thing, or similar packages. Yeah, I won't talk about the link roadmap. But there are some things on the Dyalog roadmap. I think I mentioned these, not the top one. So the vision for this at the end of the day, so with Link and version since 18.2, I think, yeah, you can, if you have a source folder full of APL source files, you can right-click on it in Windows and say Open with Dyalog, and it'll launch the APL interpreter and link the folder. So it treats the folder as a workspace, if you like. Loads all of the source code. If there are subfolders, they become namespaces and so on. And I think one thing we want to have, I don't know, maybe we'll do this in version 20. I think it would be nice. You right-click on a folder, it sees that there's a Cider config inside it, and it launches APL and opens the project with Cider, or Acre, or Dado if it can identify the APL project manager that is managing that folder, which is quite easy to do, I think. And this virtual environments business I mentioned, I think that's also going to be quite critical. You could see the launcher, your launchy, is sort of an interactive way to do this. But I don't know, does launchy allow you to define a configuration file, sort of a launchy configuration file that you could use to... Yeah, because those launchy files would be this, right? So you start, I want version 18.2, Unicode 64 with these environment variables and these Tatin packages and these NuGet packages available. And the final one here, this is something that maybe we don't use, but my first reaction to seeing, I don't know how you feel, but seeing all those references, the underscore Tatin and this, and references injected in my project space, I was certainly thinking initially that we do need maybe some kind of extension to quit using. So in the same way that you can say, I want to use this DLL, I want to use these namespaces, pretend like the content of these namespaces are here. And that's something that I think most programming languages have in one form or another. We have quad path, but it's fatally flawed, I think. we might need something new. We'll see what the feedback is from people using Cider and these references. Thank you. And thanks to Adam for the logos. They're really cool. That's it. Thank you for staying awake right to the end.